Dun, 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 dun. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Maker That Money. I am Pooch of Repkord. With me, as always, my trusty partner in crime, Mr. Andrew Mayhall, King of the Empire of Sticky, the 3D Gloopster Supreme. How are you this morning, Andrew?
I'm doing great. Little tired, but glad to be here.
Yeah, such is the entrepreneur life. Sleep is
Oh yeah.
for the dead, as we like to say.
Yep.
For those in the chat, those joining us live on YouTube, we try to record live just about every Friday. I don't know. Lately, it's been a little bit sporadic, but it's good to see everybody again. Just a couple shout outs to my homies in the chat. We've got Vicky, TJW, Karen Chow Designs. Excellent meeting you in person last week, Karen. Mr. Alex Gibson from across the pond. Good day to you, sir. And others, welcome. Thank you for hanging around. We had some technical difficulties. You can see I moved stuff around in my desire to get
You're changing too much
organized.
up at
And yep, exactly. I fell for the classic blunder. The first one not getting drawn into a land war in Asia. And the second one not changing so many variables before, and then not having enough time to test ahead of time. So that's what I get for assuming it'll be fine. But we're 6-7 minutes late, and we're no worse for the wear. So, Hack Monkey, howdy to you. Happy Friday to you as well. If you are new to the stream, to the podcast, this is the podcast where we talk about turning your hobby into your jobby. Andrew and I have been we've been small maker businesses for. Let's see. I keep forgetting the anniversary. It's been
going on 6, I believe.
6 years for you.
6 years.
Yeah. So 2016 is when we founded. So what is that? Like almost
8 years.
So yeah, we've been in it for a while, and we're still
almost a decade.
We're still figuring it out. Well, I would say it's been just about a decade since I got into like the 3D printing space, and then it took a little time to say, hey, maybe I can find a way to make a living out of this, and we're still finding those ways, right? Well,
absolutely.
If the other thing we always like to do when we start these episodes, these podcasts, this stream, is talk about our wins for the week, because we like to harness that good energy, right, Andrew?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I know you've got some wins for us. Why don't you lead off this week for us?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think this will come a little bit late. Win for a couple weeks ago, but 3D Gloop was recognized by CNET as one of the best 3D printing accessories of 2024.
Hey, that's
so
cool. Congrats.
It's cool to have an accolade or a little bit of an honor.
Never hurts to have those honors. That is fantastic. So that's good. Does that mean we're gonna see some review, or is it up already? Is this published somewhere?
I think it's up already. Yeah, I think it's published. I don't see an actual review, but it was recommended as one of the best 3D printing accessories for 2024.
Oh, that's cool.
So yeah, we'll see what else is to come.
So I'm gonna take my win for this week is the design work. So I've been driving hard while I'm in between events on trying to get the third version. I mean, V3 we call it, of the rep box, but it's probably like the 7th or 8th iteration I've done, if you count all the little dot releases and whatnot. But I've been on this like late night kick, after kind of achieving everything else I need to for the day, just kind of diving back in on some design work. And so unfortunately that's got me like, not sleeping as much as well.
Staying up till midnight, 1 a.m.
It's so addicting when you're on a tear. It's like I've got these designs I want to test out, and I'm like printing it, and I can iterate so much faster than I ever could before. So it's like when I can carve out time for R&D, it's just a joy. I'm lucky enough to have a number of machines, 3D printers, and other things at my disposal that make it quicker and more effective than ever before. So it's like sometimes I'll run down to the shop, do some laser cutting, come back here, do some modeling, print out something, fail, throw that away, do another one. And I've been having a blast. So my process has to look absolutely insane to probably the average person, where it's like, I'm going to try this. No, I'm going to pause that. I'm going to move over to this part because I can't quite figure out exactly what I want. And then I'll go work on a different piece, and then
it's that ADHD approach on the design.
It is, but then ultimately it all kind of comes together, and sometimes that bouncing really seems to help spark creativity, because like when I'm working on another part, sometimes it'll inspire like a method or a new thing that I'll want to do. And that I can apply elsewhere. So anyway, it's been a joy. I've been having just a blast with it. I know that getting things across the finish line and releasing product always takes a lot longer than we expect. I think originally I was saying like, oh, April, I'll be ready with V3, and here we are, and it's May, and it's probably still not going to be done.
I can remember. I was going to say, I can remember you like, oh, maybe by the beginning of the year,
Well, plans change, and I think this has been an interesting year business-wise for me, like with the shift to focusing a little bit more on consulting and events and travel and networking and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely kind of flipped things around in terms of what my traditional priority is, but thankfully I'm lucky enough to have a loyal following of people who email me weekly. Hey, waiting for that new box to come out. And so it's like, okay, cool. Like I am too, it's like, I hate it when timelines slide, and I feel like, I'm potentially leaving money on the table, or any of those things. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to focus on trying to be like calm and centered and happy and healthy, got to offload some of those pressures and see how that see how that takes us this year. So far so good. I mean, like, I'm in a much better mental state than I think I've been in the past. So
that's fantastic.
Finding that balance. Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. Hi, Creatrix Brit is in the chat. We also got K2 Kevin. Kevin gave me probably one of the coolest pieces of swag I've gotten at an event at Remurf last week. He gave me like my own. You've seen the poker chips going around. So for a long time, like in 3D printing land, people would make maker coins, right?
The maker coins,
right?
Yeah.
And it seems like there's I apologize, guys. Maybe I've just been kind of out of the loop in some of this, but like, a number of people are doing poker chips now. I don't know if it's the advent of like fast and easier multicolor, or if there's a creator, like who was the creator behind the poker chip movement, because I know Karen Chow made some poker chips.
I got one from Karen.
So a number of people handed me poker chips with their
Karen is the only one I got one from.
Oh really? No, K2 had one. Liz, a few others gave me some, and anyway, Kevin gave me ones with my logo and a QR code, so if I want to hand them to somebody else and they scan it takes them to the website, which is like, wow, that's cool. That saved me a lot of time and energy, and I never bring cards and stuff anyway these days, so I appreciate you, Kevin. Thank you very much. That was a really nice gift. I had a number of cool things handed to me at the event, and it was really great to reconnect with a lot of people and meet new people. You know how much I rave about going to events.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. How was it? Let's see. So for those that might not be familiar, we were talking about an event we were at. Was it last weekend? 2 weekends ago? What was it?
Remurf? Yeah, 2 weekends ago.
2 weekends ago. Right. Last weekend I was somewhere else. Brain not working quite. Get the caffeine flowing again. But anyway, 2 weeks ago, Rocky Mountain Rep Festival. So this was its second year. It's a big 3D printing festival. It's a lot of fun. Highly recommended if you're into 3D printing. big show and tell of 3D printing and other stuff. There was certainly some CNC machines and laser cutting and other open source, but a lot of the, let's just say, in the vein of open robotics platforms and desktop manufacturing, perhaps. I don't know.
Yep.
How would you classify it? It's
Mhm.
seen a lot of growth.
Yeah, I mean, it's that weird. It's a in between a weird gray zone, like of the maker movement, right? Just showing off cool things that we're doing, and then now again trade, more like trade show vibe with sponsors and that have some cool tech, and then the small businesses in between. I know that this year there was a big push to try and get some more industrial things.
Mm-hmm.
I think next year we're definitely going to see some industrial companies present at Remurf,
Mm-hmm.
because it's a great place, great location to be, especially for some of these industrial, people.
Yeah.
But the crowd there was awesome. I mean, I met so many engineers that worked in additive manufacturing at a large company
Right.
that were coming here just to hang out.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, I
yeah.
love going to these and seeing how they like grow and evolve over the years, So it was really great to talk to some of the organizers and how excited they were and what they were excited about. It was really good.
Mhm.
So, the last 2 weeks I had a stint where I was in 3 cities in 6 days.
Oh
So
my
let's see.
goodness.
So it was LA, then I went to Denver for a Murph. So I went to BlenderCon, which was really
Ooh.
cool. I don't know anything of. I mean, I know of Blender, but I have not used Blender. But Bruce has sent me there to do some investigating and to do some networking and contact management stuff, and it was really cool.
Mhm.
Lots of neat workshops. I only got to be there for the first day, but man, that's some 3D. I would say typically that show was centered more around like the visual, like motion graphics,
Sure.
and 3D rendering for professional effects and things like that. There was a
Mhm.
little 3D printing there. Definitely a lot of interest because a lot of that crowd wasn't really big on taking their creations and printing them, and a lot of them couldn't. If you saw like these renders and this just incredible stuff. It was neat. So it was neat to see that side of things.
Mhm.
And Blender, if you guys have used Blender, show of hands in the chat if you've used Blender. Have you used Blender, Andrew?
I have.
Have you played with
I'm
it?
definitely more of a solid model,
Yeah.
sort of designer, like SolidWorks CATIA.
Yeah, it's a really interesting piece of software because one, it's open source, and two, it's like this like
Mhm.
Swiss Army knife of all things.
Mhm.
Like you can edit
Yeah.
video, you can do 3D modeling. It's got like
Yeah, to
rigging and
me, it
lighting
was
and
like a software that had this weird identity crisis.
I mean, it definitely can feel like that, but it's got a huge following. It's really interesting, and the quality of what you can create and things you can do with it were just mind blowing. So it was cool to sit in some sessions and actually learn some stuff, meet some new people there, talk about how 3D printing might help some of these studios' workflow. So met some. Not to digress on this for too long, but met some interesting
Mhm.
creators that were doing motion graphics for like YouTube channels where they would actually like model something in
Ooh.
Blender, and then they would 3D print it out to have like a real world prop interaction that they would be able to easily replace with the digital asset at the same time. I don't know if I'm describing that well, but like say they were trying to do some cool visual effects trickery where they were grabbing an object and they
Mhm.
would kind of toggle between the physical object that they had and the virtual object, and it
Ah.
allowed them to do some like interesting masking and tricks, and then actually have the thing in front of them, that was in the
Mhm.
virtual world as well. So it was neat, but yeah. So that was a great event, and then after that, I went right after Remurf. I went right to Seattle for
Mhm.
a Microsoft event that I got to do with Joel and his daughter, which was really cool. It was their
Ah,
bring
yeah.
your family to work day event, and it was
Ooh, that
huge. I
sounds
mean,
fun.
Microsoft is huge. but good following. It was a terrible rainy day, and it was supposed to be kind of an outdoor fair thing. And then at the last minute, they moved us
Oh
into
no.
like kind of their indoor. They call it the commons, but it's like a massive like
Hmm.
cafeteria shared, space. Really cool, and met a ton of people there that had never seen 3D printing before in their lives, which was like always a trip.
Oh, that's awesome.
Right. So to go from like Rocky Mountain Rep Rap, where everybody's been doing 3D printing for a while, we're in this crowd for a long time, to people that were walking up and be like, "What is that?" Is like such a juxtaposition.
Hmm.
Um, but it also
Sure.
reminds me why I'm like really passionate and I love this space, because just the amazement and wonder that not just kids but adults have when they lay eyes on this tech for the first time is just incredible.
Hmm.
So that's a wrap, at least of what I've been up to in terms of the events thing. And so yes, that this is
I
why
mean, you've been everywhere.
I've been everywhere, man. Yeah, yeah, but it's been a lot of fun, and I'm leaving again next week for Prague for a Prague Maker Fair. So that's going to be
Ooh.
awesome. So hopefully
Okay.
get some coverage of that. If you guys ever have a chance to go to Prague Maker Fair, it is my favorite Maker Fair that I've been to so far, and I've been to a lot. And I've said this before, but the creativity and resourcefulness of the people at the makers at Maker Fair Prague is some of
Hmm.
the best. And Joe Prusa says it has a lot to do with the fact that they're an ex-Soviet state, and that
Hmm.
resources were limited, and so people had to get really creative with what they find and what they make out of it, and they really were and are. So I look forward to documenting some more awesome makes
That's awesome.
from the people of the Czech Republic and beyond next week. So that'll be a lot of fun. Let's see. Shout outs to Tom Lama. I saw you in the chat. I don't know if you're still with us, but he was the maker of the Puccinelli helmet. We used that at your event. Gloop threw
Oh
a
yeah.
little party at Remurf, and I got to bust out the Puccicorn ring
Hmm.
toss game, and that seemed to be a big hit, especially when played over a fire pit. So he is the one that modeled
Yep.
that. And I know, Tom, I said I was going to put it up on printables, and I still haven't done that, but it is on my to-do list.
I
So
think in part of the official rules, it needs to be played over a fire pit while drinking.
it's certainly more fun that way. But all it is my single, Viking horn out the front, and then we just made a ring toss where two people wear Viking horns, and you just throw rings, ideally across the fire pit
Mhm.
over tasty beverages. And it's kind of like,
Yep.
it could be like cornhole. It can also be like a solo game if you're trying to flip it onto your own horn. So there's lots of ways to go with it, but we had a lot of fun with it. So anyway, shout out to Tom for
Hmm.
modeling that for us. And there's actually, I don't know if you knew this, but there's actually 3 versions of that helmet. The third version that he made,
Oh boy.
I haven't shown it yet, but it has modular horns where you can replace, one's like a unicorn horn, one's a Viking horn.
Oh gosh.
I want to
I could
I
see
want
this
to do a
going so
deer
many.
antler, like one deer antler out the front. So yeah. Anyway,
And then each
modular.
each points,
Right.
each little tip has got different point values.
I think so. Like we could paint the tips different things. So hey, we're having a lot of fun.
Yeah.
All right. We are 24 minutes in. Whether we were late, we're 20 minutes in. We haven't talked about what we're supposed to talk about at all. So let's talk about what
Hmm.
we were teasing for this week. The acronym,
Yeah, let's
the
do it.
famous acronym, business acronym ROI, pronounced "wa" in French, which means king, I'm told, by Alex Swavely.
Oh,
I put
okay.
a post up last night on Twitter teasing the episode, and I said, what does ROI even stand for? Wrong answers only. And we had tons of hilarious and fantastic
Oh, sure.
suggestions. I think one of my favorite was Repkord on Ice, which will be coming soon.
Repcord on ice.
Will be coming
That's
soon
actually pretty good.
to an arena near you. Wearing my Poochcorn helmet. But Andrew, tell us what the real acronym ROI in the entrepreneurial sense stands for. I know you guys all know
Oh
it, but
boy.
we got to do a review.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as just returning on those investments,
That's
right?
it. That's it. I get, it's good to have easy questions from time to time, right?
Yeah.
So
Oh
ROI,
yeah.
return on investment. What does that mean?
Well, I mean, it's I mean, to me, hopefully, it's a little self-explanatory. We're gonna invest in something, and hopefully, we get that money back.
I mean,
And
that is
ideally,
business
we get a
to a
little bit
T.
more.
Right, right, right. So the
Yep.
return theoretically should be the profit. Yes, I suppose if
I'm well, I mean, not necessarily. I mean,
just
you
getting your money
can
back.
invest in something and just get your money back, right? Because if you're investing in things and you're constantly losing money, I'm sorry, you don't have a business.
But it is a return. So as long as it's
I
a
mean,
non-negative number, any return
yeah,
on what you've spent is a return. Ideally, a profitable
yeah.
return would be above and beyond the original investment. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, going and gambling in a casino, like if it's 51%, the house always wins, right? So
Right.
while you might win big, you keep playing long enough, they know like they're gonna get there. It's a game of statistics here.
I'll tell you something, in business, sometimes I would be happy to just get that 49% back, because there are times where you just you
Mhm.
feel like you made the wrong
Yeah,
call and you just got to take the L and move on.
yeah,
So
yeah.
in a lot of ways, I guess ROI, it depends on the context of time, because you're going to make
Hmm.
investments. You're going to make a number of investments repeatedly over the course of your business career,
Oh yeah.
and you're a lot of it. Hopefully they're more good than bad. Sometimes we hedge.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's like we're going to try a
Yep.
couple things, and some things may be massively profitable. Some things won't. Um, a lot of times the
Yep.
challenge is you got to collect the data. We can
Yeah.
speculate all we want how great a return may or may not be on an investment. But nothing really tells the tale like the actual sales data after a period of time. Um,
You got that right.
and the big challenge around that is, did you give enough time? Did you get enough info out there? Like, how do you actually
Hmm.
tether that value to like
Sure.
giving it the old good college try, right? Um, because
Hmm.
there have to be just hundreds of thousands of ideas out there over time that were before their time, or
Hmm.
just not
Yep.
well marketed, or any number of things that may have been dismissed as a bad idea or a poor return when they just weren't
Hmm.
given enough a chance to grow. Thoughts?
Sure. Well, so I mean, yeah, it's hard to, in many cases, I'll say this, that it's hard to actually accurately at the beginning define what would be your return on an investment. Like it comes down to, let's say you're trying to, you know, start a new business. And you're in your existing business, you want to branch out into a new market. Maybe it's a product or some widget. And you start having your engineers or you know your people that are responsible for eventually basically building this business, putting the
Mm-hmm.
effort into figuring out all of the details, all of the working pieces that go into this.
Yep.
Right there, you're already investing.
Yeah.
You're putting effort into that before you even started on actually producing widget.
Right.
And will it actually even produce anything? So if you're looking at what it is that you're doing, you're constantly investing in yourself or in your business or in the products that you're making. And it can be really hard to draw that line of, okay, well, where does the investment actually start? And then from there, it's like, what do you define as the return? What is success? What is your version of success?
Mm.
Because for every business and for every venture, it's going to be different. So on your subject of, oh, go ahead.
Clarify something really quick for me. So you said like it's not easy to tell where the
Sure.
investment starts. I mean, arguably, it starts when
Mhm.
$1 goes, out the door. What do you mean by like trying to define the beginning?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you could say that it starts when $1 goes out the door, but in many cases, $1 going out the door is either formulating a hypothesis or testing a hypothesis, and in that case, you're fishing.
Sure.
and you're not necessarily expecting a return. Like in the avenue or in the areas of R&D, we do a lot of R&D here at Gloop. There are plenty of formulations that I know that will never see the light of day,
Hmm.
but that's one of those costs of trying to figure out, like, okay, well, hey, where does this thing go?
Hmm.
Now, yes, one could argue saying, well, Andrew, you're investing in this. That is the investment. That's where it starts. But in my case, I use it as a learning exercise, and I'm not expecting a return on that. I only start expecting returns once I feel like I've had something. Like,
Hmm.
that's where it's like, okay, I've gone down a little bit. I've tested. I've done some customer discovery. I feel like now there's a potential to turn this into something. That's when I'm going to start my clock. That's when I'm going to start watching how much money's going out,
Okay.
how much money is, or how much effort I'm putting into something.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But again, it's going to be different for everyone.
Well, asked another way, is an investment always a dollar investment?
No,
Yeah.
no. I mean, it's in many cases. I think it's more about time and man hours,
Hmm.
because if when we get running as a startup, we usually have a lot more time than we have money,
Hmm.
and we don't value, especially makers and the maker crowd, we don't value our time properly, which is okay in many
Amen.
cases just to get started.
Yeah.
But as we continue to grow and become a functioning business, and become that boring old company, right? I mean, I still like to call Gloop a startup. But if you really look at it, Gloop's a business. Gloop's a company. It's not a startup. We might operate a little bit like a startup,
Yeah.
but the moment you start making revenue and you start making profit, you're a boring company.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, like you're just, you might be sexy or whatever, like doing edgy things, but you're just a boring company. You're an operating company,
Well, that goes
doing what you're
back to what I
supposed to be doing.
always said. Like that goes against makers, right? It's like we get tired of doing the same thing over and over again. And part of the reason the makers are terrible business
Hmm.
people is like if you want to be a success in business, you have to get to boring. And I
Yep.
I think that's a bit oversimplified in the sense that
Yeah.
you can definitely keep it interesting. There's ways like, but ultimately the core
Yeah.
fundamentals of the business have to go, so you can hire people to handle the things that you don't want to, so that you can not be bored with it. Frankly, if
Yeah.
if you're bored in business, then you're boring. I would say, like, there are so many opportunities out there, so many ways that you can do different things. But your point is well taken in
Hmm.
that we all aspire to that boredom of normalcy, of profitability and repeatability and all that stuff,
Yeah.
because that is what's going to keep you in business.
That exactly. And so it's those pieces that eventually go into making that essentially that bottom line. What you'll find is once you achieve boring, um, it's not so much the dollar investments that you are making into exploring a new product. It's not those, capex expenses.
Hmm.
It's the operating expenses.
Right.
It's the continual expenses that you experience to keep the machine running.
Right.
So it's your personnel expenses, it's your business overhead, it's all of those things. And that comes down to being the actual return on investment,
I'm
you
glad you
know.
brought up capex, because I think a lot of times when you're getting started, like you have very high capital expenditures. So buying machines, buying
Mhm.
a building, like a lot of these things that are just like
Yep.
high dollar purchase things, one time. Maybe not always one time, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's not a repeating expense that
Yep.
you're going over and over. Um, in the scheme of things, long term, those you start to realize like those are actually pretty small chunks of money as compared to like what you're spending on
Mhm.
labor
Yeah.
and a lot of your operational expenses, as you mentioned. But that initial capital expenditure a lot of times is where I think a lot of people like feel like I've invested. Like, for example, my shop
Mhm.
is full
Yep.
of machines, 3D printers, laser cutters, vacuum former, lots of other stuff, plus all
Oh
the
yeah.
other support things
Mhm.
that are sitting idle a lot of the time right now, as I've like re-architecting what I'm doing and whatnot. It, I could sell them. I don't want to. But there was a big part of me when I was first deciding like, okay, we're gonna shift gears, get away from manufacturing for a bit, focus on some other things, where I was like, I've spent all this money on building out my print room, doing tenant improvements, like all of these things. I'm never going to be able to like, recoup that investment if I don't keep the machinery going. And
Sure.
I think that's a fallacy to some extent, because arguably, like
Hmm.
the most of the machines I have now at this point, I think have been depreciated from my uh,
Yep.
from a tax standpoint. But
Hmm.
those are the things that are in my face and I look at all the time that were kind of like keeping me on the mouse wheel and preventing me from making maybe better
Sure.
decisions for myself and for my business, if that makes sense. Because I was like, I've got to get my money
Hmm.
back out of these things. The truth is I can still sell those
Well,
things
yeah.
and, all this other stuff. And it's the time, as you mentioned before, that's lost, that is
It's the
probably
time.
the more concerning of the thing, or the value of a brand that I've built or
Well,
whatever else.
exactly. I mean, so one thing that you bring up an excellent point, is that potential fallacy of feeling like, oh, hey, I gotta do something to get my return back. I gotta get my initial investment
Yeah.
back.
Yeah.
That really comes from our personal attachment to money. I feel like in many cases, makers and hobbyists, or those that are taking this bootstrap approach,
Yeah.
we are personally attached to our business, our money, our hard work,
Yeah.
right? Because to us, it represents like, okay, well, hey, I worked my ass off to get here.
Right.
And I'm spending my money. I don't want to see it go away. And of course, no one wants to just throw money away.
Yeah.
But in some cases, and this is actually what we talked about, at the Live Maker That Money,
Yeah.
we have to be able to start separating that emotion, and falling into that trap of I've got to get a return on this investment.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong; there are going to be some hail Mary moments,
Yeah.
like where you're going to go all in.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sometimes in business,
Multiple
it's not
times.
advised,
Yeah.
but there will be
Wow.
times in which,
It
yeah,
it feels
in
that
which you
way.
do.
And a lot of
And
times
I
it's
think,
just that parlay of like,
yeah.
I'm reinvesting. So it feels like an all in. It's not all in, but I know
Mhm.
what you mean. Go ahead. Sorry.
And so where I'm basically going with this is when we look at these capex expenditures, it's like, oh wow, we're going to spend $14,000 on a truck, or whatever to get to shows.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, yeah, but that's going to facilitate us to take and set up our booth and go and do these things.
Right.
What is it actually giving us? That return on the investment is that, okay, well, now we own it, we can use it for whenever, we can use it to pick up materials, now we can do all of these other things.
Sure.
While it might not actually be bringing in dollars, it's not returning dollars.
Yeah.
It's enabling us to do other things. Now we might say, it's like, oh well, it's like, how are we actually going to quantify these things?
Yeah.
It's difficult in some cases. And as Gloop is growing, I am starting to look at capital expenditures in a completely different light. It's now more so the opportunity costs
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm-hmm.
amount of time that I have to invest in these new endeavors.
Yeah.
And it usually comes down to, does it save us time? Because time is quickly becoming the more precious resource, because
Because you
we
only
can
have
make
less and
more
less
money,
of it.
or we
Yeah.
can go and borrow more
Right.
money.
Right. Yeah.
It, you know,
Right.
we can't make more time.
Yeah.
you know,
It's such a
so
fascinating phenomenon as you age, and we meet makers of all ages out there,
mhm,
and to really have an appreciation for that value, like as you age and you realize you have less and less of it, that value of what that
mhm.
time is worth increases. So in a lot of ways, I wonder if that's a contributing factor to why, like, ultimately we all just become crotchety old people, because everything is just like asking of your time and energy in a
Mhm.
way, and it's a
Yep.
depreciating or a decreasing asset. But you said something earlier I want to dig on that I think is really important, because you
Sure.
said a lot of times ROI can be hard to evaluate properly,
Mhm.
or like it's not always
Yep.
clear what the
Sure.
return on
It's
the
hard to
investment.
trace
It's
back.
it's it's not always easy to trace. So in the
Mhm.
very simplest of an ROI example, you may say, like, I am going to go sell product at a fair. I'm going to go to the fair.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to cost me
Sure.
X to get there.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sell, hopefully, Y number of units, and hopefully the value of what I sold is going to be greater than what I spent to get to the
Mm-hmm.
fair. Is that a simple explanation that makes sense? So
I can tell you that we did that numerous times,
right,
when we were getting started.
and
Like it was a simple little formula.
and I think that's a really basic and simple way for a lot of people to look at the value of like attending events as a business, or deciding to stand up a little shop somewhere to sell. I think the problem a lot of the time is that depending on what your product is and what your business is, like the value, I would argue, is not in the direct sales, the direct to consumer sales thing. It can be. I think you have to sit down and
It
personally
certainly can
evaluate
be.
that. But would you talk for a second what you've found over the years to be the value of the various events that you have traveled to when you're evaluating if you're going to pay for a sponsorship or attend a specific event?
Sure. Well, so I mean, I'll go back to the second East Coast Rep Festival.
Okay.
That we presented at, that 3D Gloop presented at, and one of those things, like, we were still really young. At that time, we had just closed out our first year. We did $113,000 in revenue, which was awesome. But if you look at the profit, we spent about $160,000.
Right. Yeah.
I
had a very
so we were not profitable.
Yeah.
And I remember, when choosing to sponsor the East Coast Rep Festival in 2019, on figuring out that simple little equation on, okay, well, it's going to cost us, I'm remembering here, I think it was like $800 to sponsor or something like that. I could be wrong. But it was something, like that. It was going to cost us, like $1,000 to get there and back, and then $1,000 for the hotel or something, around those numbers. And you add all these up, and it's like, okay, well, we're going to spend $5,000 to go to the show. We need to be able to sell $5,000 worth of product and revenue. And it's like, well, actually, no, we got to sell more than that, because if we sell $5,000 of product, there's still cost of the product. And so then it's like, okay, we got to calculate all of this.
Right.
And I remember, 2019, it being very personal, very emotional. Of like, okay, well, I feel like I'm going all in here because, I got to make all of this product. I got to buy it. I got to, transport it across the country.
Right.
Set it up. And so for me at that time, it was very much so, okay, I've got to be able to sell. I've got to be able to close these deals, and get this money back, because every penny is precious. I just lost, $30,000-$40,000 in the first year getting started. I don't have money to afford to throw away more.
Sure.
But it was around, I would say, probably later in 2019, 2020, when it actually started occurring to me. It's like, well, wait a second. It's actually not this simple of an equation.
No.
There's these, extenuating, like, aspects of attending an event. People know you, people get to see what you're doing, and it's more long tail. It's brand awareness, and it's understanding. It's understanding that, that not every customer is ready to buy at that point. And
exactly.
I remember actually at Rocky Mountain Rep Festival, literally this past one, a customer came up to me. He had bought 4 or 5 bottles. But he's like, you're the reason why I got into 3D printing. He's like, you went to the Westin in Colorado in 2018 or 2019 and had a booth there. And it was like a small table. And he's like, you were showing your stuff off. I wasn't ready to purchase then. He's like, but I have been a long time loyal customer. I keep coming back, and it's awesome to see you here. And that was where it's like, it took 5 years, 4 years for that to actually happen.
Yeah.
But Yeah, I mean, it is one of those things that actually happened. That was the benefit of going and putting in the effort to going to these shows, is building a customer relationship like that. Like, yeah, he orders all the time. We've actually exchanged emails many a times. He's an amazing customer.
I love
But
hearing
at
stories
that
like that.
time,
Yeah,
he
yeah, yeah.
wasn't ready to be a customer,
Sure, sure.
you know?
And
Um,
and
and that's just one example.
yeah, but it's a fantastic one, and it's actually kind of an angle like I hadn't even thought about. As silly as that probably sounds, like you're absolutely right. Not every customer is going to be ready to buy like right at that moment, and I think maybe that's just another way of saying,
Mhm,
brand awareness, brand building value, and whatnot. So when you're looking at your breakdown
mhm,
now, when you're deciding to go to an event, um, I don't know.
mhm.
Arguably, some might say, well, building brand is a luxury of some degree of success, right? Like because cash is king, and when you're getting
Sure.
started, it's like I need every dollar I have in order to like pay for these things, and brand awareness is all good and
Mhm.
grand, but if like I'm not going to convert that sale for 3 years, 5 years, whatever it is, like I need to make sure I'm going to be around that long. So
Doesn't matter at this point. Yeah.
right. So
Yeah.
so how do you balance
Well,
that, and what's your outlook in terms of like where the ultimate value of attending events are
I mean,
now?
I'm going to quote you on this, right? It's not a marketing problem and it's an awareness problem.
Right.
That's what people have.
Right.
And that I think what it comes down to is that again, as entrepreneurs, we have to start thinking in different ways. We have to kind of pick apart these problems and look at them from so many different angles to get a perspective of the real truth. I'm sure some people have seen those little diagrams. It's like it's a shadow casted on the floor from a particular angle, and you see a circle or you
Yeah.
might see a
Yeah.
square,
Yeah.
but when you actually pull yourself out, like, it's a different shape entirely.
Right.
It's a very similar aspect.
Yeah.
You might not have the money, and I'm not advocating to spending money you don't have here. But what I'm trying to say is that in some cases you have to be strategic in those efforts that you're going and participating in. Like, this year there was a show that I really wanted to go to and sponsor and do, but it just didn't make sense. Now one would argue it's like, well, okay, that's going against what I just said. And it's like, maybe, but I think really it's coming down from a different perspective. Like,
Sure.
I had to take myself out, remove the emotion, look at it from so many different angles, and come up with a solution that made sense in the time.
Right.
And really focus.
And that's
Because again, as an
not easy
entrepreneur,
to
you're
do.
balancing and juggling
Yeah.
so many different things.
Well, and to be able to take the emotion out of it and the FOMO piece, I mean, there's a lot of yeah, believe me, for as many events as I go to, there's probably
Mhm.
like 20 more that I wish I could. But obviously, yeah, there's limitations to that, and it takes some degree of like maturity a lot of times to really step back and say, you know what? I think I'm going to get a better return out of spending my time doing X, Y, and Z instead of like going to this event. It's like, yeah,
Yep.
cool. That's where the party's going to be. That's where a lot of my friends are going to be. That's great. But I need
Mhm.
I need to keep this thing going. So,
I
I
need this specific thing for my business. Yeah.
right, right.
Mhm.
When I look at ROI, just for the event piece here, and I have to imagine this has evolved for you as well. I would say one of the not
Mhm.
fallacies, but one of the pitfalls perhaps that maybe early entrepreneurs fall into when they're making the evaluation. They're thinking like, go to event, sell product. If I sell more than I
Mhm.
spent, then it's a good event to go to. If not, then not. I don't think a lot of
Mhm.
people spend time actually like committing to um, getting out of the booth and doing some networking or doing some perhaps work on
Yep.
some business to business relationship, finding vendors. There's a lot of ways to get return at these types of events that I don't think are obviously or immediately obvious to people that
Mhm.
are new. I've always been a big
Intangibles.
they're intangibles, right? But at the same time, like
Mhm.
how do I define what the value is of making a new business
Mhm.
connection, making a having that brand
Mhm.
out there so that 5 years from now I have a critical mass and a much better brand awareness. You know, how do you value that
Yeah.
long tail stuff or the intangible stuff?
It's difficult. I mean, so the best way that I can kind of describe it in this case is testing kind of one of those wild, crazy hypotheses. Like I have an idea that I need to continue to grow.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I know from internal strategies, right? Sessions that I'm sitting down, writing things down, or documenting, or even just thinking through myself, like what are the key elements that I need to move into position for my business to be successful in the next 6 months, 9 months, year, 2 years, however far out.
Sure.
And then trying to work backwards from there, figuring out like, well, what could I do to accelerate that growth? Or what could I do to move, you know, pieces on the chessboard in a favorable fashion or arrangement where I can then jump other pieces or shortcut things,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, we're playing three-dimensional chess. Every business is a game of three-dimensional chess, and you have to be able to kind of predict or understand what are things that would accelerate your growth, and then from there, once you understand these things, I think it just comes down to how do you factor it into your equations. If you're going to go to an event like a Rocky Mountain Rep Festival, there's going to be a ton of other individuals. As I mentioned, there were a lot of engineers, a lot of really smart individuals attending, just attending.
Mm-hmm.
Or they were also there showing off their projects. Making those connections to me were more invaluable. Not that I needed to sell them a bottle of Gloop. It was more so that, hey, like we have a solution that you might be able to use in this specific application,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
things were able to then start moving forward. Again, I understand these things might not pay off for months, maybe even years.
Right.
But it's one of those things where it's like, if I don't actually try, I don't shoot my shot, right,
Mm-hmm.
then I won't ever know if it actually is successful. And so again, this is a hypothesis that I'm just testing. And so to me, it's not so much like, okay, this is an investment that I'm expecting a return on. This is a probe that I'm sending out into deep space, hoping that something comes back. And in many cases, I think we have to, as entrepreneurs, be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a balance. It just comes down to how do you balance it.
I think that's well said. The thing I would throw in terms of evaluating return is really, it's more of how you look at the whole thing. So I would say, like, if you're gonna go to the event
Sure.
anyway, let me see if I can articulate this the way that I want to. Every event that you go to is always an opportunity. Everything you do, every time you leave the house, every time you pick up the phone, that's an opportunity to network, to make a connection, and arguably, if you have that mindset, and again, not every connection is going to pay right away or ever. But when you look at things in the aggregate, the more people that I talk to, the more potential I have to find an opportunity for a collaboration that could lead to greater sales, to have more people that would want to help advocate.
Mm-hmm.
So collaborating is always a great way to grow a business, because now you've got more amplification of the message. Remember, we say we don't have we have an
Mm-hmm.
awareness problem, and what better way to breed awareness than to have other people help with your messaging, ideally in a way that's mutually beneficial. So
Yep.
Gloop is a fantastic product for collaboration, because it is literally the glue that holds people's designs together a lot of the time. And people want to show off their great designs. Hey, you've
Mm-hmm.
got a great design. I like that. I want to support what you're doing. I've got a great product here that can allow you to unlock new potential in your designs. It's a very clear win-win thing. Now, it may not
Yep.
always translate to you like you. I guarantee you, I know you're not looking at like, hey, when
Mm-hmm.
when John approaches me with, hypothetical John, with
Mm-hmm.
this idea and says,
Yeah.
hey, can you send me some Gloop because I'm going to put this model together and whatnot. For the most part, you're like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get it out there, because in the scheme of things, it
Yep.
doesn't really cost you a whole lot. And if somebody else
Mm-hmm.
in building John's models or watches his live stream and whatever, like sees it, and the brand is out there, and then next time they're thinking, hey, I want to glue something together, they're going to think Gloop, right? So you're not
Yep.
immediately going like, how many things is this person going to sell? I think a lot of people fall into that trap. And we don't all have the luxury of being able to just like give out product willy-nilly with the expectation that it may never
At the beginning, I fell
pay
into that trap.
dividends. But I think part of the reason you are where you are is
Mm-hmm.
because you try to say yes to as many things and to work with as many people as possible. In just asking you this question, and this is a long way to my point, but I want to get there.
Mm-hmm.
How many over your 6 years in business, like how many creators do you think you've collaborated with, or how many projects do you think you've sponsored? Like it has to be a ton.
I mean, I can't even count.
Right.
I can't even count.
Right. Every time I talk to you, you're like, "Oh yeah, I sent some Gloop to so and so and so and so," and like whatever. And do you feel
Mhm.
like that has been a good return on investment? I mean, you must be able to think of some where nothing ever came of it, and some like a lot of good came from it. But
Oh, there's plenty there's plenty that have had negative experiences.
interesting.
Like a negative ROI.
We haven't
Where
talked
I
about
mean
negative
it's
ROI.
you know, yeah. I mean, not so there was a content creator that we sent Gloop out to. This was been several years ago. Uh, you know, I, relationships totally fine.
Yeah.
But one of the things that actually happened was because it wasn't a really good fit for his application. And instead of me saying no, I said, okay, yeah, let's send it. Because it was more so just like, hey, he's a big content creator. And it could potentially open a bunch of doors.
Sure.
But what I didn't sit there and think through was the application he was using it as. I should have said no to him. I should have said, listen, we would love to send you Gloop. We would love to do something, but this is not the best application.
Okay.
And, in that case where we did send it, because again, I was like, this is cool. He's reaching out to us. It needs to happen.
Sure.
It wasn't the right application for the job. And it actually, when he did a video on it, he's like, listen, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work this way. And it wasn't overall negative. I mean, there was some negative pieces to it. And, it was like, well, yeah, it really wasn't. When I was able to reflect on it, it would have been better for us to probably say no, not right now. And we had customers that had ordered and whatever, and they're like, oh well, I ordered for this specific reason, like can I return this, and like we had a number of them, so in that case it was a negative return.
But overall, would you say that in all the sponsorships that
Mhm.
you've done over the years, like your ROI, I can't imagine you've actually tried to do math
It's a
on
net
this,
positive.
but it's a
Yeah.
positive, right?
Oh,
Like because you
no,
like you
I
clearly start to see
yeah,
like
it's a
getting
positive.
that
Mhm.
stone rolling and whatnot. And at no point did you feel like, so a lot of it is kind of a leap of faith. You have to trust that by just getting your name out there, by doing branding,
Mhm.
by like saying yes to as many things as you can, you're gonna spend some money. You're gonna spend a lot of money. You've
Oh,
probably
sure.
given away tens of thousands of dollars worth of Gloop over the years. But that was your
Mhm.
advertising mechanism, right? You didn't spend that money on billboards or magazines
Yeah.
or whatever. Maybe you did some. I have no idea. But
No.
this is the trust in that. So that's an interesting case. I think to go back to the
Mhm.
events, the point I'm trying to get to is like a
Mhm.
lot of times there's some sunk costs. Like these are things you're already doing anyway. So if I'm going to the event anyway,
Yep.
and I'm selling stuff, look at it as like I'm going to be there anyway, and maybe your primary set up what your primary and your secondary goals are. Maybe your primary goal is to at least sell $5,000 worth of product, whatever. But your
Mhm.
time, you
Yep.
have a great opportunity to kind of double dip or triple dip on that time, in that at the same time you can be
Mhm.
exchanging business cards. You can take 10 minutes to get out of the booth and like walk around and push your comfort zone in terms of
Mhm.
making sure you're talking to people, like
Yep.
explore. You got to get out of your echo chamber, first of all, of your own space,
Mhm.
because like that allows you to
Yep.
see and set your mind into another mode where you're like exploring, not just like selling your own
Mhm.
thing, but like actually being
Oh, yeah.
open-minded to like what other things are happening out there, and learning those unknowns, right? Like that you like to talk about all the time, like getting out there
Exactly, exactly.
and making
Well,
adding some context to things.
one of the things that was interesting, and again, I'll share some things that triggered immediate thoughts. There's a couple things that I would love to go into. I know we're running short on time, but um, at Rocky Mountain, one thing that I noticed as I was walking around, because I did make for sure I had time to go and explore. There were several companies that were offering solutions like adhesive solutions for, build platform adhesion. And, to me, it's like, that's interesting because it's now been several years since we started. We originally started
Yeah.
trying to solve that problem
Right.
and transitioned away.
Yeah.
And, not saying that like, oh, hey, we left a vacuum or anything, but to see multiple companies rolling out products that are aimed at these things still,
Yeah.
like is interesting. Now,
Yeah.
I also want to caution saying like, there's there could be confirmation bias, right? Of like, oh, well, hey, like there must be an issue here. I should go and still chase it again.
Right. Right. Right.
Like I have plenty of data from our own startup, like to say like, okay, well, yeah, there might be issues here or there, but
Yeah.
does this really actually solve the problem?
Yeah.
But it's one of those interesting things that I was able to observe and then take back. I've actually got some notes on it. I got samples from people, just again to stay informed and see what other people are doing. Like in that case, it was really interesting because it allowed me, like, I talked with these individuals like, oh, well, why'd you create this, like,
Yeah.
why are you having these issues? And it gave me so much information that I could come back and I can check against things that I've experienced and say, do I need to rethink?
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. I think it is really important is it gives you this opportunity throughout everything, is the opportunity to rethink
Yeah.
and to unlearn what you've learned and try and relearn in a different way.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the superpower of business.
So
Um,
I want to, before we, as we're wrapping up here, I want to take a question from the chat. Memetics3D asks, on your negative ROI experience you just told us about a little bit earlier, how does that negative ROI, what you kind of classified that, how does that experience compare to the
yeah.
value of the lessons learned from it? Because, and I love exactly where he was going with this.
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. So yeah, I mean, that negative ROI was definitely an incredibly positive ROI moving forward because it allowed me to actually kind of understand a little bit or take time before I just agree to do something to make for sure, like, okay, does this actually make sense? Is this the right time to do it?
Right.
Because at that moment, it was also one of the times where we were actually faced with some pretty big questions and decisions on like resellers and partnerships. Like at that time, we also were given the possibility of like partnering with a rather large company, mostly online,
Yeah.
but to resell our products. And it was for a different market, a different industry. And it was that moment that it was like, well, wait a second, this is not the right time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and I respectively told them, no, it's not the right time yet.
Yeah.
Give me a little bit more time. Let me get there, and
Yeah.
we can keep the dialogue open. But it wasn't the right opportunity. And so that's where I think the biggest thing came from is relearning or learning to rethink everything. And challenge what I knew, because at that time, like, I was just giving Gloop out to the big guys, whoever would be interested.
Sure.
To me,
Yeah.
it was like, to take it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a low expense, and if something good comes from it, great. And I didn't think about the negative potentials.
Yeah.
If, for instance, their application wasn't the correct one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's changed some ways in which I've been able to formulate future products and how I actually engage with other creators.
But the point is fantastic, that even if the immediate feeling of like potentially dollars or is negative, the overall feeling of that learning experience was actually like a positive return for you. And that is why this metric is so maddening, because
Mhm.
it feels like it's subject to tampering in terms of like your perspective on like what the return
It's a
is.
non-linear solution.
It's so nonlinear, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
like it is not always clear what your benefit is for a period of time, and it might take some time to unlock what that return is, to learn that lesson. All of those things, which is why it's such an
Mhm.
imperfect metric a lot of the time, or it's an incomplete metric at the very least,
Mhm.
right? That from a basic standpoint, yes, we want to
Yeah.
make sure that we're earning more money than it goes out, but the problem is it's not always clear where those dollars are coming from. Like, you were lucky enough to have that individual tell you the
Mhm.
story about how he got into 3D printing because of you.
Yeah.
Think about how many people out there that you've impacted,
Yeah.
probably subconsciously even, that wouldn't necessarily attribute the fact that
Mhm.
they saw your brand on a poster somewhere or whatever, and then that reminded them, right? They're not
Mhm.
emailing you to let you know that. And so it's
Yeah.
impossible to track what the true return is and where it came from. And
Mhm.
so we can only speculate. And
Mhm.
it's a, what's the right
Yeah.
word, what's the right mathematical, like when you're, it's basically hedging your bets, right? It's like you need to make all of these investments because in the
Mhm.
aggregate and over time, it's that
Yeah.
trend, right? It's a scatter plot, and hopefully
Yeah.
that line is upward,
Yeah.
right?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's a statistical probability, right?
There
If
you
you
go.
take
Yeah.
enough, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you take enough bets, that you keep coming up and you keep trying, at some point you're bound to win.
Or go
to
broke by
or
the
lose.
same
I mean, yeah,
by
it
the
could go
same
go either
argument.
way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I think the point
Yeah,
is well taken too. You
yeah.
have to have some trust and put those investments
Mhm.
out there and try to look at it not as a singular decision point, but that I'm gonna do these 10 things,
Mhm.
and did I at least get like a good feel from whatever percentage, 70%, 60, ideally over half,
Mhm.
right?
Well,
Yeah.
yeah. And I mean, I'll also say, like, I'm a very analytical person myself,
Okay.
and the hardest thing in some pieces is removing all of those analytics, because there are some intangibles that you are not able to evaluate, and you will never be able to. And trying to evaluate them will drive you mad. It will lead you down the wrong path. And result in, a lot of confusion and frustration. Some things you just have to kind of set there and let it react and let it turn
Let
into
it
something or not.
marinate. Yeah, 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 yeah. Fantastic.
Yep.
One more comment and then we'll
Y- you
wrap it
know
up if we can. Sideline review in the chat says, I calculate ROI on everything I do with my sideline product. If I have to machine a hole, not a hole, if I have to machine a hole for $2, what value is it adding? Usually, is it replacing labor or speeding up a process? Yeah, I think that goes in with the analytical thing that you're talking about too, and I think a lot of makers like
Mhm.
want there to be like a very clear calculus like that.
Yeah.
And for a lot of decisions, like
Yeah.
that is a great North Star for you. I think that is a good metric. Um,
Yeah.
it's not
For something like a machining operation. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
If I automate this system, if I spend $1,000 to automate this and it saves me
Mhm.
like this much time, like what is your time worth? Yeah, you can come up with calculation. I think it, why it might not be a perfect
Mhm.
calculation. A lot of times, like it can give you a really good sense if you sit down and try to do that analysis. But don't fall
Mhm.
into being overly analytical about the whole thing, because I guarantee you there are returns that are going to
Exactly.
keep coming back to you in ways that you haven't even considered. And I think that's a
Mhm.
pretty good place to leave it. I don't know. What any other
Mhm.
parting thoughts for you? Wisdom, 6 years in on
Yeah.
evaluating returns.
So last kind of parting thought. This past Rocky Mountain Rep Festival, I did something that never done before,
Oh,
and that was really try and like put an investment out there into building relationships and keeping relationships, strong. And that was, like one of those things that I did was I wanted to throw kind of like a little private party get together with my friends, my colleagues in this industry, and basically show them that how much I appreciated them helping me get to this point, but also just as a way to connect in a different level. And you know it cost money, right?
Yeah.
That was an investment that I put in.
Yeah.
And it's not something that I'm expecting a return on. It was more so like, I'm investing in this. I'm investing in my friendships, my relationships, to keep them strong and to keep helping each other out. Because to me, and you say it all the time, right? It's like the rising tide lifts all benchies. It's
Yep.
it's really just investing in our friendships, our relationships in general. That's what helps each other out and continues this process of continuing to innovate, continuing to drive things forward. I met a lot of really awesome individuals, made some new relationships and friendships, hopefully. And it's one of those things where it's like, there might not be a easy return on investment, because it's not really, I'm expecting a return. I'm investing in my friends. I'm investing in myself. I'm investing in the ability to continue doing these things.
That is so well said, and it's a great articulation that I think is missed by a lot of people, because we don't evaluate our personal friendships in terms of like, well, if I spend this time with Andrew, is it going to come back to me? It's like, no, it really is that simple. And in business, especially in small business, when you're getting started, like, at the end of the day, people want to work with others that they feel good about working with. They want to feel good about you. They want to feel like they've had a positive experience with the brand. And so throwing a party and getting together and just like celebrating the win, having a good time, having some drinks, talking to people, networking, connecting with people is going to pay dividends in ways that a lot of us just don't even think, where you get so fixated on the dollars and cents without thinking about how much it actually unlocks by working with others to elevate. So I appreciate you saying that. It's probably the bane of every like advertising and marketing firm's existence out there, right? Because they're constantly having to justify their value in doing whatever activation or whatever advertisement campaign that they come up with. And companies are like, but you're charging me $100,000 for this campaign. How do I know I'm going to make this? Like, the Super Bowl ads are a fantastic. Like, how do I know if I drop $1 million on this 30-second ad spot that I'm going to get that much back to me? A lot of times, like, you don't. I mean, we have more metrics than ever before to like kind of track where purchases come from, but you have to kind of have faith and make educated guess, and ideally not drop all your eggs into one basket. That should be one campaign across, all the other things that you're doing as well.
Yes.
And when you're at that level, $1 million on a campaign is like we've said in the past, you're just moving decimal points or adding zeros to the end too. So it sounds crazy to us to drop that much money on something.
Hopefully one day
it may not.
That Super Bowl ad, right?
And we hope that all of you will as well. Guys, thank you so much. And gals, makers of all shapes and sizes and genders out there, thank you for joining us. This has been a joy. We really love having these kinds of conversations, and I love that you are along for the ride with us. We will catch you probably in 2 weeks, as I will be traveling again next week. But whenever that may be, you will know. Follow us on Twitter, the Maker That Money. That's where we're putting up our little announcements for now. And until then, we will catch you on the next one. Andrew, great episode, brother. We will talk to you soon, man. Take care, everyone.